The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
Okay, let's go.
We created government as our servant, beholden to us, and possessing no powers except those voluntarily granted to it by us. Now, a self-anointed elite in our nation's capital would have us believe we're incapable of guiding our own destiny. They practice government by mystery, telling us it's too complex for our understanding. Believing this, they assume we might panic if we were to be told the truth about our problems. Why should we become frightened? No people who have ever lived on this earth have fought harder, paid a higher price for freedom, or done more to advance the dignity of man than the living Americans, the Americans living in this land today. There isn't any problem we can't solve if government will give us the facts, tell us what needs to be done, and then get out of the way and let us have at it.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what a president should sound like. Seriously, if you didn't recognize the voice, that was Ronald Reagan. That was a speech from 1986. And what's amazing, I won't use the word insane on this time. What's amazing is if you listen to that, that literally could apply to today. That is insane, actually. That literally could apply to today. Anyway, hey, it's Ray Dustar, Deep Shallow Dive. It is 10 o'clock at night, and I am jumping on this thing to put this episode together so you can listen to it in the morning in regards to the follow-up to the episode from today, or it will be yesterday by the time you're listening to this, which was the pregame for the Republican debate, the second Republican debate, and this is the post-debate analysis. You know, I've said it before, and I said it in my first episode, and then I said it in the episode yesterday, that the hot take is for all these guys to drop out and basically the Republican Party unite under Donald Trump and start playing chess and stop playing checkers and literally force the Democratic Party, if they continue with their indictments, and make it to where Trump cannot run as the Republican candidate, make it to there's no election. There's no election next year. You know, that's the only move, because honestly, after seeing what I saw tonight, I mean, that was a mess. That was just a mess. And it was a mess in a different way than the first debate. But wow, I really was completely disheartened by everything I saw tonight. Like everything, including the commercials, which I'm going to go into, which one of them was hilarious. And it kind of proves the point that there's so much nonsense in all this. And then having Gavin Newsom, the Democratic California governor, on air with Sean Hannity after it, having like a bro fest, talking about In-N-Out Burger, and I mean, just total bro fest. Like, it's just a clown show. This is all a clown show. It literally makes me truly think the concept of the uniparty, which is everybody else excluding Trump, to be honest, but it makes me think they're all in on this together, because that was super weird. Like the Sean Hannity, Gavin Newsom bro fest afterwards was just so goofy, completely goofy. All right, so let's get into it. I'm going to go through some things. Actually, this was the funny part. I ended up watching the debate on the treadmill, and I took notes on my iPhone while doing the treadmill and watching the debate, and I managed to log 19,000 steps in. So I guess that was pretty good. But all right, let me start at the top. And really, unlike the last time where I went candidate by candidate, I'm kind of just going to go chronologically through the debate, and I'm going to give you some observations that I made. The first observation was that I really feel there was absolutely a coordinated effort tonight to go after Vivek Ramaswamy, and that was from Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, and Mike Pence. I think those three guys either did this on purpose or it just happened to play out that way. Actually, nothing happens to play out anyway. I really think they did this on purpose, but they really ganged up on him. It was pretty apparent to me that one of the goals tonight was to try and just ridicule him as much as possible, interrupt him as much as possible, which Nikki Haley did. She really interrupted him every time he started talking, which, again, obviously is not polite, but I will tell you it worked. It absolutely worked. I thought Vivek lost his cool tonight. I thought he was a little too political. He went from being off the cuff straight shooter like he was in the first debate and really has been throughout his campaign and all his appearances on various podcasts and everything else, to he came off like a politician tonight, and it was not a good look for him. There were a couple times that I thought he reverted back to his previous style, which is what he should always do. But overall, I really thought he came off not good tonight, not good at all. And I could see this kind of setting him back a little bit. Mike Pence, again, just too political. Every time the guy gets asked a question, well, I'd like to thank you for asking me the question, and I'd like to thank Fox and Univision, which, by the way, that was a weird combination. But I'd like to thank you guys for hosting such a wonderful, we don't want to hear any of that stuff. Like, we're over all that. Honestly, tonight made me realize why Trump was so polarizing to his fan base in 2016, because he didn't do any of that stuff. There's a great Dave Chappelle clip, and I'm going to see if I can find it and see if I'm able to post that. But he explained why, people gravitated toward Trump, the ones that did. And, tonight, again, it made me realize why that's the case, because none of these guys came off to me anything besides just JV, like just junior varsity. Like, it made me think this is really the best we have to offer. If Trump does get indicted and is not able to run, and they don't do my idea, then who's really going to represent us? Honestly, to me, the only one I could see would be Ron DeSantis. But again, it also made me realize, like I said, the only reason, or the reason Trump was so polarizing, that's the word I've been looking for, polarizing, was because he kept it real. He really kept it real with the American people. And Vivek had been doing that, but tonight I think he got off track. Okay, a couple more observations. There were 2 or 3 commercials, and I am going to talk about the commercials because, like the Super Bowl, I actually did watch them. But 2 or 3 commercials with South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. And I truly think that if things end up going to fruition with Trump being able to run, I think that's who he's going to pick as his vice president. It's a woman, and I think it's going to be Kristi Noem. Okay, the other thing that I just didn't like tonight was there was just so much talk. Well, first of all, there was so much talk about Trump, and I'm going to get into that in a second because that really revolves around a couple of the candidates more than the rest. But there's also just so much talk on Biden and blaming him for everything and all that. In all honesty, to call a spade, do you really think Joe Biden is in charge right now? I'm asking you, do you really think he is? Have you watched any of his interviews, any of his appearances? I mean, even just watching him walk, watching him in various world settings where he turns around and walks the wrong direction off stage. He turns around and shakes hands with the air. He gets confused about things. He slurs speech. And again, it's all about age with him. I'm not saying anything in terms of him on a personal level. I'm just talking about his mental, wherewithal being degraded by his age. So the question is, do you really think he's in charge right now? And what I thought or what I think is kind of sad is, nobody's going to call that out. I would love it if one of these guys called that out and said that instead of, blaming him for everything. I mean, I think Joe Biden got more airtime tonight than anyone else. Him and Trump actually got the most airtime versus the candidates really spelling out what they're all about. So I think that was, just a miss by everybody. Now, getting into Trump a little bit, again, just too much talk about him. He's like 800 points ahead in the polls. I'm just kidding about that, but I think he's literally 40 or 50% ahead of all these guys. So why would he come to debate and stop giving him that airtime? Especially when it comes to Chris Christie, I just don't get it. This guy is just he is just hell bent on vengeance with Trump. I mean, he at one point looked in he looked in the camera and was like, I know you're watching. I'm talking to you. And then he said, if you don't show up and if you don't address these things, you're no longer going to be Donald Trump. You're going to be Donald Duck, which I didn't even get that actually. I don't even get the analogy there. What he should have said was, you're not going to be Donald Trump, you're going to be Donald Chump. Now that is pretty good, but the Donald Duck, I don't even really understand that. Like, it's so personal with this guy. God, it's so personal. And to me, it just comes off very juvenile, and I don't think it benefits him. I think he needs to, it's fine if you want to point out policy mistakes or point out the increase in the debt during his term, but it's just so personal with this guy. And Mike Pence a little bit as well, although, he's way more polished. Again, tonight, Pence totally off brand, did not bring the fly, did not have the super fly there. But with Pence, it's personal. DeSantis took a couple digs as well. All those, I don't know. I'm just not a fan. I really feel like it discredits themselves more than discrediting Trump. All right, so next observation, and I'm going to issue him an apology on behalf of myself and Russell Westbrook.
Next question.
No, hold up, Russ. We actually owe him an apology. But I actually thought Doug Burgum was great tonight, believe it or not. And honestly, if I had to say who won the debate, it actually would be Doug Burgum. I think he won the debate. He came off very intelligent when he got to speak. The problem with this guy is he's just such a unknown entity. But you know what? I'm going to dig into him a little bit more. I actually feel like he's probably got more to offer than I gave him credit for, but I really haven't known anything about him. I just kind of based everything on him being such an unknown entity and such a wild card. I didn't think he kind of belonged even in the race, but I was impressed with the things he talked about, and I almost wanted him to be a little more assertive and assert himself a little more throughout. So anyway, Doug Burgum, apology, man. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to discredit you as much as I have. All right, let's get into a few more things. This border situation, this is crazy. I mean, there is a problem. They showed a Fox drone, and I've seen so much footage of all the stuff going on at the border. I don't understand how, quite frankly, Democrats can say there's not a problem. Like, this is another situation. God, I almost wish I had the capacity to get up and go to the border myself and see it for myself and see what was really going on there, because it just makes no sense to me that you have one side saying there's, the worst god-awful problem in the world, and the other side saying there's absolutely no problem in the world. It's another case of we're living in a time where information is the most accessible. Everything is the most accessible. Video, Twitter, everything. How can we disagree so much about there being an issue at the border or there not being an issue at the border? And then, to be honest with you, if there's not an issue, are all these people just making it up? Are they all just making up the videos and the drone footage and all the reporting and the deaths that get reported of, migrants drowning in the water? And is that all just being made up? It's not. It can't be. Anyway, that's a weird situation to me. Okay. I also thought the moderators were pretty bad, and I hate to say that because I know that's not an easy job or an easy thing to do, and maybe I'll get my chance if I can moderate the Vivek versus RFK Jr. debate, which after tonight, God, I think that thing might be a sunken ship because I think it lost some value tonight based on his performance. But, Dana Perino was okay. The other guy, Stewart, I thought he was just not good at all. And then the lady from Univision, I also just did not think she was very good. I know that's not an easy role, but, they lost control so many times tonight. And God, it was so childish, which ironically, I thought it was going to be better because it started off pretty civilized and they had pretty good control, but it went downhill pretty fast. And I don't think they did a good job of really putting the candidates in their place and making them stop. There was so much talking over one another that I just thought that they could have done a better job. Overall, I don't see any of these guys swaying independent voters. There's nothing that if somebody is on the fence, I just don't see any of these guys being able to convert them to the Republican side. And, I will say this about Chris Christie. He did nail it with the teachers union stuff. He really did nail it with that. And that is definitely one of the major problems with the education system in the United States is the power this teachers union wields. So I'll give him credit on that. What else? Let's see. The other thing is I thought that Vivek used too many examples tonight. I'm not a fan of that. I was talking to Sandy and Mandy in blah, blah, blah. I'm not a fan of that type of political talk, especially during these debates. And then I also am not a fan of, people trying to personalize it. I know what they're trying to do, but, when they say, my father was blah, 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 and I grew up doing this, that's not relatable to everybody. And quite frankly, people don't really care that much. And so I think Vivek, again, did too much of that tonight to where he really did. He totally changed his playbook and he just became a politician tonight. Not good move. Not good move. You got to rethink that, man. As far as the moderators, one more thing is, maybe they should have a lot more yes or no questions, and that's it. Just allow people to say yes or no and nothing else. So maybe that is something that could fix, the talking over one another and the chaos that was really there tonight. Another thing I thought was weird was, and who said it about, Mike Pence said this, and then Chris Christie said this about Joe and Jill Biden, where they were saying sleeping with a teacher. That was like a visual I did not need, neither about the Bidens or the Pences, when Mike Pence said, I've also slept with the teacher for the past 38 years or whatever. That just was not a visual I needed. Another thing that was crazy to me is the fact that Jake Paul got mentioned in the debate tonight when they asked Vivek about, going on TikTok with Jake Paul. You know what? Good for Jake Paul. Dude's from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm from Cleveland. Hey, Jake, congratulations, man. You got mentioned in the Republican debate. That's That's impressive. The TikTok discussion, I'm going to table this a little bit, but the hilarious thing about the TikTok discussion was all of the candidates were basically bad-mouthing TikTok. It's a threat to national security. It's the worst thing for our children. It's this, it's that. And then I don't know if you guys noticed, this is ridiculous. And I'll tell you why it's ridiculous. There was a TikTok commercial that aired like not directly after that segment. It was maybe the next commercial after the next segment. But if you go back and watch, there's literally a TikTok commercial that aired during the debate tonight after all the candidates were bashing TikTok. I mean, if that doesn't tell you that Fox and, well, in this case, Fox and whoever else is putting on this debate, all they care about is money, I don't know what could be a better clue than that. You've got all the candidates bad-mouthing TikTok, and then let's cut to commercial, and it's a TikTok commercial. Okay, another observation on tonight was, man, they were really pushing that Ukraine agenda, and Dana Perino said the price tag is $76 billion. I think that is completely wrong. I've seen in print that number is closer to about $120 billion already being sent over there, and there's another $6 billion that they're trying to get through. So I thought that was strange. There was also a commercial that was Republicans for Ukraine. I thought that was a little strange as well. So obviously they're definitely trying to, I guess, push that next $6 billion of money through. You know, Tim Scott said that 90% of the money is on loan to them. I thought that was crazy talk. And honestly, it made me lose a little bit of credibility and respect for him, because if that money is on loan, do you think they're ever going to pay it back? I mean, that's just I don't know. That was pretty terrible. And by saying that the money's on loan, you know, they basically all admitted this is a proxy war, and they pretty much all kind of fessed up to that. Anyway, like I've mentioned, future episode that's really going to delve into the military-industrial complex, and I can't get on board with this Ukraine stuff. I just can't. So we'll get into that. The other thing I thought was just strange and odd to me was, I can't believe they talked about 9/11. I really can't. With as much controversy as there still is on that topic, I was very surprised they brought that up. Lastly, I do want to talk a little bit more about, this was after the debate ended. They went right into Sean Hannity, and he brought all the candidates on and, you know, had a discussion with each of them. But then he brought Gavin Newsom on, and, you know, like I said, it was a bro fest. You can tell they were absolutely trying to hype up the upcoming debate with Ron DeSantis. And by the way, I just kind of thought about this. I'm surprised I didn't think about this earlier. If Gavin Newsom has no intention or desire to run for president, why is he debating DeSantis? Because DeSantis is running for president. So, like, why is that even happening? I don't even get it now. I really didn't even think that earlier. But then when I saw him, and then Sean Hannity pushed him on is there any situation that would cause you to run? And he basically said no, but I mean, that's like meaningless. He'll go back on that, not a problem. But it made me think he absolutely is going to end up running, because otherwise, why would you debate Ron DeSantis? What's the point of that debate if it's not intended to have some type of meaning? But it did make me realize, I think that if Newsom is going to, you know, be called into the game, it's not going to happen anytime soon. They're going to parachute him in probably during the DNC convention. So that's literally in August of 2024. So I'm going to do a little more research on that. But for some reason, now I think that if that does happen, whether it's him with Michelle Obama in whatever combination, I don't think that's going to come out literally until the 2024 DNC convention, which is in Chicago in August of 2024. And then lastly, just to finish on the Gavin Newsom, Sean Hannity, DeSantis thing, it's so much confusion, and this is all just such a mess. It's really such a mess and a joke, to be honest with you. Like, I'm very disheartened after what I saw tonight. I think that, as much as I hate to say this, I don't know. It's not a good look. It's not a good look for the US of A. I will tell you that. So anyway, sorry for not being more positive, but I'm calling a spade. And like I've said before, and I'm going to say it again and probably keep saying this, I think the only chance the Republicans have is to all drop out, all get behind Donald Trump, basically say, unless you allow Trump to run and make this a fair fight, there's going to be no election. I think that's the only play. I don't know what the consequences of that would be if the Democrats say, okay, that's fine, drop out. I don't know, but I don't think what is on the table outside of Trump stands any type of chance. All right, everybody, I promise to be more upbeat on the next one, but this was my raw reactions, and that's about it. I called a spade. Talk to you soon.
This episode was brought to you by Boost Liquid Vitamins. Wake up, take your Boost, start your day. Drink your vitamins, build your immune system with Boost. Available on Boost.com.